Well, hello, everybody who is a member of the Everyday Buddhism membership community and the Everyday Sangha, because Everyday Sangha members are automatic members of the membership community. We have a special YouTube video promotion for you guys. By the way, we're on gallery view, so on the recording, so that everybody can see everybody. But I wanted to say that we're doing a special announcement of things we're bringing to the membership community to give you more value. Yeah, we got the blogs on there. Yeah, we've done a couple of special YouTube videos, but probably not as many as we would like. So we wanted to add a little more substance to that offering of the community membership. The other thing we want to do is introduce a new member of our team, if you would call that a team, and that is Rob Canyo Micah, and he's another Bright Dawn lay minister. I don't remember what LM group, Rob.
LM9, same as Levi Sensei.
Oh, you guys were the same group. Wow. Okay. So these are LM9 alumni. How about that? And you guys know Levi. He's been around with us for a while, but Rob's going to help out a lot. He's going to start taking over the open sanghas in the day. Not we may alternate. It might not be always Rob. He may say, no, I don't want to do this anymore. But Rob will be taking over those Tuesday afternoon open sanghas, while Levi will continue in the Wednesday evening role, unless we hear otherwise. But in the meantime, what we're announcing is we're going to offer some new Dharma talks, Dharma presentations that we intend to be serial. In other words, one after another, to focus on subjects that can be a little deeper, not just one Dharma talk, but a Dharma talk focusing on a subject of interest or particularly of interest to either Levi, Rob, or myself. And they will go in multiple multiple days, and we'll post them. We'll do video, either YouTube videos or podcasts, depending on what all of us decide is best for that presentation, and then they'll be uploaded to the community membership site or uploaded to YouTube with links to the video or audio presentations. So I think that explains the logistics. If you guys can correct me as you go if I miss something there, but that's sort of what we're going to do. And to start, we're going to enlist our new team member, Rob Canyo Sensei, and to describe what he has ideas about to offer to the membership community. Rob Sensei?
Greetings. Thank you very much, Wendy Sensei. Yes, some wonderful ideas here. First, a little bit about my background. I've been involved in Buddhist practice for a little over 30 years now. I started out in Soto Zen, and then over the course of the last 10 years, I've been branching out, looking at other aspects of Buddhism, primarily Jodo Shinshu, Japanese Pure Land Buddhism. And as Wendy Sensei mentioned, I'm a lay minister with the Bright Dawn Center of Oneness Buddhism. But with everything that I've learned, in addition to the Zen and Shin-based rituals that I've learned, a good portion of my Buddhist practice also involves chanting and music. I played taiko drums in a taiko drumming group associated with the Buddhist temple, and I play a Japanese form of bamboo flute called the shakuhachi, which also has a long history with Buddhism. So one thing that has really been at the source of my interest in all time is, how do you take what you've learned? How do you take what you've learned on the cushion? How do you take what you've learned in the service, in the chanting? How do you take what you've learned from these teachings off of the cushion and apply it to your everyday lives? How do you take these teachings and apply it to your practice outside of the temple, outside of your own little special place of tranquility. So that's one aspect of things that I want to talk about. Another thing is that a couple of years ago, I completed a certification program in methods of Japanese psychology. And these are things that are collectively lumped under the title of Morita therapy, which evolved out of Zen Buddhist teachings, and another aspect called Nikon, which evolved out of Jodo Shinshu teachings. And the four main things that Japanese psychology focuses on are acceptance, coexisting with unpleasant feelings, working with your attention, and self-reflection, and specifically a self-reflection method called Nikon. All of these are very, very powerful tools. They all evolved out of Buddhist practice and teachings, and they are wonderful additions to bringing calmness and serenity into your everyday lives. So those are things that I will talk about at some point. I'm also really big on quotes, and two of the quotes that I try to carry around with me every day. One of them, Reverend Gyome Kabuse, said, "A Buddhist life is a life of no regret," which sounds like a kind of impossible thing to achieve. But in spite of that, I still try, just like the impossibility of the Bodhisattva vows. And I'm sure that's something that Levi Sensei is going to end up talking about, because he had a bunch of wonderful comments about that not too distant past. But the other quote comes from a talk that Reverend Mas Kodani of the Buddhist Churches of America gave. And the gist of his talk was, don't let ego get in the way. And he was focusing primarily on taiko drumming and musical performance, but it is beautifully generalized to your everyday life, because there are so many instances in your everyday life where ego can get in the way. One of them here, as I was preparing for this, was I realized how nervous I was talking to all of you. And then I realized, yes, that's my ego getting in the way. And I was able to accept that and set that aside with what I've learned through the methods of Japanese psychology. So it all comes together in that way. And I'll be happy to share all of this in future talks and presentations. And then the last thing that I really want to focus on is, as I said, I come from a Soto Zen background. Levi Sensei, when he talks about Zen, he comes from a Rinzai Zen background. And I'm sure at some point we'll end up with some comparisons and contrasts between those two, because even though Zen is Zen, also, Soto and Rinzai have some subtle and some not so subtle differences. And that's all that I have for the moment. So thank you very much, Wendy Sensei.
Thank you, Rob Sensei, Rob Kanyo. Those sound exciting. I'm a fan of the musical link. Not that I play taiko drums or the Japanese flute, but I do think music has a place in both meditation and Zen, not Zen, but specifically, but Buddhist practice. And even though most people might not think of it that way, there was a whole course I took with the Shinzen Young Unified Mindfulness Group when I was doing teacher training, where we were talking about meditating to music which helps in awareness of the somatic experience that we generally do not tune into. And if we become more aware of things that are happening in our bodies, in our feelings, like form, feelings, as going to the Heart Sutra, if we become aware of the things that are coming up in our somatic experience, we're more aware of our ability to just let them go, which sounds like a contradiction, but it is not. And that was one thing that music training taught me, because they would have you do like a mixtape. Well, I'm dating myself here, but I don't know what you call it in you guys' generations, but put your favorite songs together, and from whether past, future, not future, past, or the current musical listening, and you put them together, and then when you're listening to them and meditating, you're aware of the feelings that they actually are generating. And then what happens is you focus on whether are those feelings arising on their own? Are they coming from out there, from the music? It's a really interesting experience. So music and Buddhism, I think, has a lot in
If,
common. A lot.
if I can just interject one thing, one example of that is that, there is a certain use of music in Buddhist ritual as well.
Right, right.
In Soto Zen services that I used to attend, we'd have two different gongs, a bell, and a set of wooden clappers. And there were instances there where no new folks showed up. Nobody showed up who required any instruction whatsoever. Everybody who was there had been to prior services and knew exactly what to do. And so the entire service was done completely silent except for the chanting and the music, with the clappers and the bells being the musical cues to cue us as to what comes next. And it was a very, very powerful stuff.
Yeah, and well, it's actually, and as most of you know, I came from the Tibetan tradition. That was sort of my comeuppance in Buddhism, and in the Tibetan tradition, whoa, do we have some wild instruments there? We have conch shells and drums, and the services are punctuated. Same deal, we have visualization of deities, and then all of a sudden, conch shells are blowing, and it's loud and boisterous. And to be honest with you, I had a little trouble with it because I'm more of a, it was just too, it was crazy. But that Tibetan is like that. It's like, crazy with the colors and crazy with the tankas and crazy with the music, but that's part of the practice, really part of the practice. So yeah, music. The other thing that I'm wildly interested in, as Rob Sensei already knows, is I'm also a student of Japanese psychology, a big fan of Greg Creech and the Toto Institute. I did not get the certification like you did, but I've used it so many times in actual my professional life as a coach, a career coach and a personal coach, and also in my help with people in Buddhism. It's so effective. It is so immediately effective to people in obtaining balance or overcoming anxieties or numerous things. So that ought to be exciting. So thank you, Rob. So next up, Levi Shinyo Sensei, take it away.
Sure. Thanks for having me here as always. I've done a couple things now with Everyday Buddhism, as well as working behind the scenes, trying to help out as much as I can. With a little history, starting off where I came from and where I'm going. I had gone to my high school. I'd gone to a performing arts high school, and I was a visual art major there. I have so far kept that as a hobby, and once I went to college for my undergraduate degree, I had pursued a degree in philosophy, which I graduated with, and now I'm in seminary for graduate school. So my interests, of course, in Buddhism are in the practice of it and the everyday practice of Buddhism. That's why I'm here. But I also have a large interest in the historical and philosophical side of Buddhism and its history, the culture, and the background of how it came to be and how the different forms came to be. So one of the things I really would like to focus on in this project is trying to illuminate some of the history and some of the culture and some of the philosophy behind these practices, especially for a lot of us here in the West who are just learning about Buddhism or just coming into contact with it now. We lose a lot of the history and the context of why we do things. I know that Rob Sensei mentioned, both of us are involved in Zen, and though Zen is very well known to Americans in a general sense, people are really enamored by what seem to appear as these extremely strange stories and rituals, but given the context, they actually seem to make a lot more sense and why they actually have value in everyday practice. So as much as these philosophies and history won't get you anywhere on their own. They may illuminate the reasons why we can do things in everyday practice. Along with that, of course, I studied a lot of Western philosophy and Western religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and so on and so forth. So another thing I'd like to offer is finding some of the community and kinship between the various faith groups in the world. What can we as Buddhists say learn from Christianity? What can't we learn from it? In America right now, we are a largely interfaith group. We meet with people from all over, and we have to learn from each other and learn how to get along, even if we may not agree totally. But at least in my time at seminary, being, I believe, the only Buddhist student there, I have learned a great deal from people who are on different paths than me. And that's something I'd like to share and examine. And maybe show that Buddhism, though it's not what we're used to, isn't so odd after all. I think a lot of us are more familiar with it than we ever realize. So along with that, I'll go through some of the major historical events, philosophical movements, maybe describe some of the schools of Buddhism, and maybe talk about some notable people, some philosophers, Tanabe, Nishida, Maso Abe, and maybe some of the people who introduced Buddhism in America, say Suzuki, D.T. to Suzuki, and even Alan Watts. Talk about what was good about them, talk about what was maybe not so good about them, correct some understandings and misunderstandings, but that's at least what I'd hope to bring to the table here.
That's awesome. And we would always depend on Levi Shinyo Sensei to bring the foundation, the philosophical foundation to support what the heck we're talking about, right? I think that's really important. And not to get on a critique or a soapbox, but yeah, I do that sometimes. But one of my major concerns with the popularity of Buddhism and its relatively easy access on the internet is sort of the lack of the foundation behind some of these things. And too many people take sides or dismiss or say, oh, I'm a secular Buddhist and don't ever use the word faith, or don't ever use, they don't understand where it all came from and what it means. And like anything else, if you're a student I've studied theology on my own independently, and also through Buddhist teacher training through the Tibetan school, Asian Classics Institute, which was a Gelugpa-based, Tibetan Gelugpa-based study. And Gelugpa is the school of the Dalai Lama, and it's the school of the debaters, the ones that would get up and hit each other, right? And so debate was very, very important in that school. And so to debate with any kind of finesse, with any kind of success, you need to have a real strong background in the foundations of your subject matter. So I think this is hugely important and something missing in most, I think, Buddhist groups you find online anyway. I mean, sanghas that you go to in your neighborhood, they may offer some of those things, and then there'll be teachers who have a lot of background to give you that. But these sort of online sanghas that we are one of really don't always offer all that. So I think that's awesome. And one other thing I wanted to say, comment on what you said. Oh, it's gone. It's gone. Sorry. But yeah. Oh, I know, the people, the personalities of that's awesome, because also it's like the endless list of Buddhism. There's endless names, Japanese, Tibetan. People are very confused and probably have no idea what each individual figure brought to the Buddhist conversation, or the Buddhist canon, if you will, the modern canon. Just so many different takes on it. So that would be awesome. This is so exciting. I have to participate in all your Dharma talks. This is awesome. So what I'm going to bring to the table is little more out there, maybe. Those of you who have followed me for any length of time know that I am a hack poet, and and I enjoy it tremendously. And words, I get a lot out of using words to trying to express a moment in time through the minimum amount of words, much like creating a haiku. Um, that's very important to me. And so to me, what I'm going to focus on is sort of the literature in Buddhism, poetry in Buddhism, that sort of thing. I'm a big fan of the beats, and one of my favorite writers at all times is Gary Snyder, and I practically worship him and his ability to grab the Dharma out of a mountain or whatever. He's just, oh, he's amazing. And what I'd like to do is offer some ways that the average person who doesn't consider themselves to be a writer or a poet to hone those type of skills by just closer observation. And one of the ways I would like to do that is, one, through the practice of what we call small stones. Small stones is a practice that Satya Rabin from the Amida order made very popular years ago. It's grabbing a moment in time, just observing a moment in time and creating a small stone, just a few words. Doesn't have to be haiku, doesn't have to be, 575 syllables or anything like that. Doesn't have to be seasonal necessarily, but just a small moment in time to grab where you are. And this is a practice in mindfulness. It's also a practice in being in tune with where you are, like, which is another one of my passions, is somatic awareness, what's going on in your body. So that's one thing I would like to offer. Another thing I might talk about offering, but I could really get some pushback from Levi for this, or his Rinzai teacher. As some of you know, I've used koans in my podcast as teaching tools. I think they're very important, much like writing little small stones, writing haikus. I think using koans to go beyond concept is a wonderful thing, but not necessarily in a formal way, in much more of a literary way. Which, is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, most koans are small historical or at least literary recordings of the interactions between students and teachers. So there's certainly a difference between practicing koans and talking about the stories which they contain. And of course, the stories which they contain tend to point to something more. But yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna.
You're gonna turn me in to the Rinzai police.
No, if they come for you, that's on their own. But yeah, there's certainly a difference between the practice of one and learning about one. I mean, if they were secret, you couldn't go out and buy a book of them at any bookstore.
Right.
So there's certainly no secrecy to them, but I think you've already acknowledged that there's a difference between the formal practice of actually doing it and talking about them and learning what you can from talking about them and what they can point to. So I have no issue with that.
And in addition to that, remember that the word koan itself means public record.
Public record, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I've always laughed at that a little bit. It's sort of like when we in Tibetan practice, in Vajrayana practice, or Tantric Buddhism, you would get empowerments, and it was so funny that you'd get these empowerments by these great lamas, which is great, big, long ceremonies and empowerments, and you all this ritual, and they do things like put stuff on your head, and then they'd hand out these little cords that meant you were empowered in this practice, and then you could do this visualization, and then you turn around and you find the empowerment written in some book somewhere. It was like, okay. But no, my technique with koans, which I love, is based on a sort of a kludge between, and then not a serious study like some people would take, but much more of a kludge between John Tarrant, the author of Bring Me the Rhinoceros, which is a book of koan study, which he did. He was a Rinzai priest, if I remember correctly, but he taught koans in a very like sort of a irreverent way, just to absorb, to take into your everyday life. Also, our teacher, Reverend Gilme Kabose, wrote a book of, translated and commentated on a book of Zen koans to use in everyday life. He would give his commentary on it. So I would like to use that book maybe as an exploration, along with some John Tarrant narration, to take a koan and say, how can I use this this week in my life to bring Buddhism in my life? So those are the two things. I have some other ideas, but those are the two things right off the bat that I would like to take up. So anybody else want to add anything? Rob Sensei, Levi Sensei?
That pretty much covers it for me. I can't think of anything else to add.
And you, Levi?
I don't think I have anything more. Perhaps the only thing I could talk about or offer maybe a talk or two is on Buddhism in the information age. This is very new. Having Zoom and Facebook and all these different groups that people from all around the world are able to meet each other and practice the Dharma and hear it. And what are the good? What are the bad? I know we talked a little bit about people just getting into Buddhism and some of the issues that run into it. It just reminded me, I'm on a Facebook page which is run by Rinzai Roshi. And, there's a specific rule on there that says, hey, please don't reply to posts, with something that stinks of Zen. Don't reply moo or, oh, who's asking the questions? Well, if you wouldn't say that to someone in real life, don't say it on the internet. So I thought, that's an important thing to talk about too, and explore this new age of teaching and where it's going.
I love that, and I love that. Definitely, that would be a fun thing to talk about. Definitely, it is a new age, this strange new world we've entered, and that the pandemic has even amplified. Right. So yeah, it's really awesome.
That's a great subject, especially since I've seen various comments online from some people saying that if it's not face-to-face Buddhism, it's not true Buddhism. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's been a great debate about that for years. And actually, if you guys, Levi will know this because Levi and I did a deconstruction of this podcast with Ken McLeod, who was just nuts about that. If you weren't going to be in front of him, he wasn't going to be your teacher. He was like a Gestapo, like the soup Nazi, it's like, wasn't he? He was really out there, and it was shocking to me. And I said, well, this was right before the pandemic, so it wasn't, but I remember saying, well, what happens if someday we can't travel for whatever reason, climate control? And I made that mention. And sure enough, here we are, and we can't do this. Yet Buddhist teaching is still thriving, still, I think, more. The number of sanghas we can participate in right now all over the world because of this pandemic is just mind-blowing, really. So we can learn so much. So this would be great. This would be awesome.
I'll end myself here with the Zen priest who I'm studying with at this temple. He commented on that, asking if you could teach Buddhism online, and I liked his response was simply, you can't teach Buddhism at all. So, online, in person, you can't teach what Buddhism teaches. So you gotta do it yourself. So online, in person, that's all. So I thought that was a good response to that. Maybe we can talk about that more another time, though. It's a teaser for the future.
Yeah, that's excuse me, really good. Excuse me, David Brazier, Dharma Vidya, the head of the Amida order, he always said Buddhism can't be taught; it is caught, as if a virus. And I was like, I like that, and that was before we're talking about COVID, but you know that was his line, and I really think that's appropriate. That's how it feels to me. Mm-hmm. And I think in the Tambutsu Ge, from the larger Pure Land Sutra, which our Tambutsu Ge is a little tiny verse or part of the larger Pure Land Sutra that Reverend Gilme Kabose translated and commented on. To me, that really illustrates the caughtness of Buddhism. It's almost like a love affair, rather than a scholarly endeavor. And if it doesn't feel like that to you, then I think maybe you're not practicing Buddhism. I hate to say that, but something to throw out there. All right. If anyone else have anything else or not, I think we've covered this and more than covered it, maybe. And we're going to try to get this edited and up on YouTube, and then we'll start rolling with some things to put up there. And this will be so much fun. So thank you, Rob Kanyo Micah and Levi Shinyo Walbert. You guys are wonderful to work with, and this will be fun. Until next time.
Until next time.
Until next time.